operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Gator Truth. On today's episode, we're going to take a look back at the Gators' loss to Texas A&M 34-17. Really, it's weird because I want to say the game was closer than the final score indicates, but in a way, it wasn't. The way I put it on X, for those of you that did not see the post on X or do not follow me on X, I'm sitting there in the fourth quarter of the game at Kyle Field, and I said it feels like there's one fan base who sees a 7-point game and they're having the time of their lives. They're having a big party, and on the opposite fan base, they see a 7-point difference and they feel like they're in an attic apartment above a really fun party. So with that said, yes, most of the game it ended up being only a 7-point differential with A&M pulling away late. And at the same time, it felt at times that the 7-point lead was insurmountable. My mom texts me. She's sitting in another part of the stadium with family, sends me a text after Jordan Castell gets the interception to start the fourth quarter right in front of me. And the text says, "Do you think we'll be able to come back?" And I said, "Give me 2 drives." And sure enough, that's all we needed to know what was going on. But without much further about it, let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Let's talk about this game. And of course, we go over the keys to the game to really get through it. And first thing I had was run the ball as usual. And I do want to say that starting off, we did a good job, and then things kind of fell apart. Part of that was predictability. Part of that was A&M went to zone, and we'll talk about that in a second. And by doing so, stopped our passing game. And if you can stop our passing game, then you can really stop our running game. Baugh ended up with 18 carries for 65 yards. At one point, I do believe it was like 11 carries for around 65. So that'll tell you exactly how much his carries decreased in quality throughout the game. KD Daniels did come in. He got 3 carries for 28 and really carried mostly in the first half. Good spot by him coming in, 4th guy off the bench, 4th on the depth chart, really, at running back when you count Jacoby Jackson, who was out due to injury, and of course, Duke Clark, which, as my cousin texted me, you know how I love to talk about Cousin Will. He's like, "You mentioned Clark Duke." I go, "I know I did." But anyways, moving forward with that, I mean, once Texas A&M kind of switched it up, it was a problem for the Gators. Couldn't really run the ball or anything else. Let's talk about the hoping for improved tight end blocking and continuing to be blocking. Livingston, of course, we said was questionable, and I talked about it maybe a little bit of addition by subtraction to see maybe we can see more 11 personnel. In the first few drives, it looked like we'd do that, but then we sank back into that 12 personnel. I do want to say first drive got a little bit of that 12 personnel. Amir Jackson getting a touchdown catch as the third string tight end. So a little bit of good there. I said we wanted to hit throws beyond the line of scrimmage, which of course we started off doing that. We saw that quick passing game you've heard me saying I want for years. And you know what? We really didn't see too much after the first, 3-ish drives, the quick passing game. We did have some throws beyond the line of scrimmage, but then we didn't. Let's talk about third downs real quick. I think that's, talking about throws beyond the line of scrimmage is as good as any. Florida was 1 for 10 on third downs, which is completely awful. And that 10% on third down conversion is not the first time we've seen something like that. Of course, awful against Miami, awful against LSU. Really, it's the road problems that we know we have under Billy Napier. But there were 3 or 4 times in this game we had a third down and we're throwing screen passes, and some of those were third and long. And of course, one time we fumble, and the fumble gets recovered by A&M, gives them a short field. They get a field goal, and really the game's off and running from there. But with that said, it really, if you're not hitting beyond the line of scrimmage, it does allow them to shut down the running game, especially when your offensive line blocking ends up being poor. Austin Barber, all SEC guy last year, put on arguably the worst performance of his Gator career. Pro Football Focus rating him a 0 in his pass blocking. Obviously, that's not good. And it wasn't like he was the only problem on the line Saturday night, but definitely a big one. And then also I said take advantage of the talent at wide receiver. I will say we did start off doing some of this. I mean, we saw Dallas Wilson getting another touchdown catch. We saw Wilson getting some big catches. We saw Vernell Brown getting some deep catches. Nice catch that was reviewed. I believe, I believed it was a catch inside the stadium. And of course, the call was upheld to get us and set up that touchdown pass to Dallas Wilson. And Eugene Wilson had a few good catches down, down past the line of scrimmage, showing he can. And of course, we've seen it before. I go back to Georgia 2023, where Trey Wilson can make a difference going downfield and trying to hit the ball. I really would be thrilled to see a good offensive coordinator. Of course, I did think we'd see more Callaway influence, but seeing more Callaway influence or seeing a good offensive coordinator with the talent we have at receiver, with guys like Trey and Vernell and Dallas and Aiden. And of course, we've also seen a few other guys come forward in recent weeks. J. Michael Sturdivant, is solid. Also, you've got TJ Abrams, who had a catch for 15 yards and has played a decent amount the last few games. Really plenty of talent there that a good offensive coordinator could put up more than 17 points against a good Aggies defense. And of course, they did play really well. On my personal X account, I did talk about today how much shade was thrown at Coach Chaos when he left and how he's not doing anything on the defensive line and he's overrated and blah, blah, blah. Well, the problem with that is his defensive line just dominated our offensive line. And he was let go after the 2023 season when Billy Napier decided to keep Rob Sale, I must say, at over $1 million a year coach contract, and rehire Darnell Stapleton as the second OL coach, who then a month later goes to the NFL. We bring in another second OL coach. But the point is, our O-line was not good, but we didn't make changes there because our head coach is, quite frankly, boys with his OL coaches, and paying them way too much for the product that we've seen. But then you've got a guy who many Gator fans, probably just to defend Napier, totally trashed. Well, 2 years later, who won that argument? I would argue if you watch this game even for a second, you know that Coach Chaos, Jay Bateman, who I don't bring into the conversation because he was hired away, there really wasn't as much trash talked about him, especially after the linebacking class that he brought in right before he left for A&M with Miles Graham, Aaron Childs, and guys like that. But with that said, they dominated on the night. Great on them. Good for them. Just really sad that our offensive line with 2 O-line coaches and 4 returning starters puts on the performance like they did for most of the rest of Saturday night. And again, part of that is, play calling and doing things that don't necessarily work around weaknesses on the tight end, or not on the tight end, on the O-line when you're not playing well, or, the tight ends if they're not blocking well. Because you can scheme around some issues. And of course, we don't really do that. We see, hey, let's throw a screen and have the tight ends try and beat a fast DB to the ball carrier. Yeah, things that just don't make sense. DJ Lagway, 21 of 37, 245, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. He had some throwaways here. He had some bad throws here. He had at least one play that arguably could have been picked off. But again, start off well. Start off 8 for 10, which tells me after that he went 11 of 7, or not 17, 11 of 27. How's that happen? Well, you went from your scripted drives and doing things that work to, okay, A&M kind of goes from a single high look to a double high look, and we've talked about that. And we can't seem to scheme things that make it easy on DJ. And so, yes, part of that, he needs to play a little bit better, but part of that is do things to help your quarterback out. And we don't seem to want to do that. And of course, that's what's got us here. That's what's got us at 2-4. That's what's going to end up having this team with a losing record unless something changes. And, good as time as ever to talk about Billy Napier being asked about road games in the press conference today on Monday, and basically saying, he was asked about ranked road games. I personally would have just said against teams with a winning record, make it the biggest group possible, which he is 0-4 on the road. But his response is, well, they're good teams and they're on the road, and, basically making a whole bunch of excuses that it's perfectly fine. And I will say, I was waiting for loss 4, but if you're perfectly fine with losing on the road, as long as the teams are good, you're not going to win championships. I'm sorry, because you've got to win on the road to win championships. That tells me all I need to know about a coach. And that's really all I'll say on the matter right now, because before we get off the offense, I will also give credit to that A&M crowd. Easily one of the top 3 environments I've ever sat in as a opposing fan. So credit to them. They were loud all day, going nuts. And we just couldn't do anything to take them out of it. And I had mentioned that as well. You can't let the fans get into it on the road. And of course, we let them do it. I talked about the party atmosphere, which again changed later. Moving on to the defense, and, the keys I had, you got to contain Reed. He's dual threat. He can be in consistent passing. Well, very first play, just gave him, both our safeties failed on a coverage, leaving Craver wide open. He even bobbles the catch. If you're anywhere close to him, the second the ball hits him, if you hit him, he's probably not making that catch. But instead, both safeties completely away from him. And what does he do? Make the catch, 67-yard play. Next play, Reed, and this is what makes me bring it up, uses the dual threat, uses his legs, runs in the end zone. Fans start chanting Marcel Reed. And it was really on from there. Solid run D. And I talked about multiple running backs over 5 yards per carry. And I've got to say, a big factor in why this game didn't get ugly earlier is because the run D overall was solid, which is probably some people are wondering, what do you mean by that? For the most part, Reuben Owens, the running back who ended up with the most carries, and we'll talk about that in a sec, 17 carries, 51 yards. That's 3 yards per carry, a long of 7 yards. That tells me we did great with Reuben Owens. Marcel Reed, 7 carries, including that first carry, long of 8 yards, touchdown. But 7 carries, 37 yards. So he was averaging 5.3 yards per carry, got the touchdown. The one where it's really questionable, Le'Veon Moss, who we talked about being their best back, 5 carries, 46 yards before getting injured, 9.2 yards per carry, long of 22, and a touchdown on that 22-yarder. Of course, got injured, and I think that really helped the Gator defense get stops they needed to get. Which I actually want to kick it back to offense on something real quick, and I only want to say this because I've talked before about how the defense does get stops and gives opportunity to offense, and the offense doesn't capitalize. There were 4 drives that the offense got negative yards for the entire drive. 4. I have never seen that before. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that before, but I just thought that was crazy. But the defense did, they kept it at a 7-point game for a while. In fact, let's count it. Florida, with it being a 7-point game, Florida forced 1 punt. Then there was a missed field goal. Of course, they only allowed 18 yards because of, the situation there. Then a second punt. So we're already talking about 3 stops. And then 3 and out. And then again, field goal where the Aggies went 5 plays, 21 yards. And then Florida gets a field goal. Then what does Florida's defense do? 3 and out. Then Florida, gets an interception on the drive to start the fourth quarter. And at this point, it's been essentially 7-point game outside of the exchanging of field goals since the middle of the second quarter. The defense, in my opinion, really did its job here. And of course, by the time after Florida turns the ball over on downs, I still don't know why we went for it on 4th and 6 at the Texas A&M 49. Plenty of time left, only 7-point game. Defense has been basically lights out. I mean, has not allowed a drive since the beginning of the second quarter, has not allowed a drive over 25 yards. And I say that because we had like a 21-yard, I guess they allowed a 39-yard drive when we picked it. But either way, has not allowed a big drive the entire game. And you give Texas a short 50-yard field, and somehow going 50 yards, we allow them to take 8:09 off the clock. I remember there are A&M fans around me. Of course, I was sitting literally across the aisle from the student section, but that is what it is. One of the A&M fans in front of me in the Gator section, great resale there, by the way, is telling them to go fast. And I'm thinking, why would A&M go fast? In fact, I joked you could take the water boy strategy with how we're playing on offense and just take a knee the entire rest of the game and let the clock run out, and we probably wouldn't make a threat. And of course, we didn't. Very first play after that touchdown, we go 1 play, 0 yards, turnover, and A&M gets a field goal to put it as a 17-point lead. But again, the point is the defense overall was disciplined. They weren't at the beginning, let 14 points on the first 2 drives. And then just again for kicks, let's go through it. After the 14 points, A&M, after the 21, 3 touchdowns. So first 3 drives. After the first 3 drives, 21-14. A&M does not have another drive over 50 yards. And I bring that up because that means they essentially start at midfield or better for their last 17 points. Or their last 13 points. I'm about to get the doc. It was 21, it was 34. Your math is wrong. Yeah. But either way, 13 points. And they didn't have to go further than half the field to get them. It's ridiculous. Offense really let down the defense in this game. Obviously, the defense let the defense down at the beginning of the game, but it can be so much better. That's really my piece. There are many times I've dunked on this defense when they've let us down over the previous years, but this was outside the first few drives, they buckled down, figured it out, gave us opportunities, and we gave them short fields to defend and respond. So really got to look at that from an offensive standpoint. Good job on no one asking Billy Napier about play calling today in the press conference. Finally, let's talk about the team. Few penalties. I mean, to be honest, I don't think penalties really made much of a difference in this game, one way or another. I mean, Florida had 6 for 54. At one point, we did have a big run given away because Dallas Wilson blocked out of bounds. I mean, true freshman, second game ever, kind of making a bit of a mistake. It stinks, but with the way the offense is played, I'm not sure I could necessarily, say it made the biggest difference. Of course, at another point, I believe it was Rocco Underwood got a hands to the face while running down to cover a punt that gave A&M 15 yards. But again, I don't think it made a difference on that drive. But yeah, it really is not the I just have to laugh because overall we did that. Of course, I put overcome the 12th man for the most part. We didn't see a ton of false starts or stuff, so I've got to give credit on that. But then again, the offensive line outside of that did not play well. I said we've got to start strong, and we really, really did start strong by scoring a touchdown, and then we did probably the worst thing we can do, and that's give them a 2-play drive right after that. Keep in mind, it was a revenge game. We didn't do that. Didn't really have any returns and didn't really play with the backs against the wall. So overall, didn't do anything I thought we needed to do to win. It is what it is. With that said, funny enough, last year, A&M, I said the thumbnail on the video on YouTube said I'm done. And that's after we got, toyed with by A&M at home. And of course, vote of confidence happens, ends up making my 7-5. So I said this year I'm going to stick by the 9-3 till the end, no matter what it looks like. Well, the 9-3 is gone. I do think it's time for a change. I'll probably have to do a whole episode on candidates and what I'm looking for, but I will say this. We do need something, and there are things that can be done better, and that's what's really frustrating is there is the talent. And if you were to tell me right now that, just throwing this out there, I know this is not any pitch by any means, but if you said right now, Steve Spurrier, just go call plays and design plays for this offense, I guarantee you it gets 10 times better because he could make things happen with the talent that's there, even with sometimes lacking on that offensive line. Well, with that said, that's a whole discussion for later. Gators fall to the Aggies. Aggies play really well. I said this was the hardest game in the preseason for us, and it might turn out to be that way. And who knows? This may be the year the Aggies finally make Atlanta, and it may be the year the Aggies finally get a conference championship. We'll see, but still, I would love to have won this game. And with that said, thank you all for listening. And as always, go Gators.